Hi, my name is Ethan, and for the last few years I've been living as if in some surreal dream. You know, the kind where reality blends with fantasies, and the usual roles and boundaries become unrecognizable. But I should probably start from the beginning. 2 years ago, I retired after 20 years of service in the Los Angeles Fire Department. For 20 years, I spent my time saving lives and property, risking myself and witnessing human tragedies. It left its mark. I became withdrawn, unsociable, with a bunch of professional traumas and habits. My wife, Catherine, who I had been with all these years, tried her best to help me. She urged me to see a psychologist, find a new hobby, start living a full life. But I just waved her off and grumbled in response. What the hell, a full life? I've done my share, just let me sit in silence with a beer. But my peace didn't last long. One fine day, Miranda, Catherine's mother, showed up on our doorstep. Now she was definitely not the typical mother-in-law. Tall, stately, with a mane of fiery red hair and a lively, almost girlish gaze. In her early 50s, she looked at most 40 and lived accordingly. "Well, my friends," Miranda stated peremptorily from the doorway, "I've decided to volunteer at the Wildlife Rescue Service, and you, my dears, could also use a shake-up. So get ready, we're heading to their center in an hour." Catherine just laughed, while I grabbed my head. As if I needed this. I would rush off somewhere with this reckless woman at the first whistle. But as soon as I opened my mouth to protest, Miranda measured me with a mocking glance and winked. "What, scared, fireman? And you're still a hero of our city? Well, okay, sit at home, relax. Catherine and I will save a couple of poor little critters in the meantime." That was the last straw. I couldn't have some mother-in-law doubting my courage and determination. With a groan, I got up from the couch and shuffled to change clothes. Well, hang in there, forest creatures. Ethan James is coming to the rescue. That's how I got roped into this adventure. At first, it was all fairly routine. We helped at the shelter, cared for the animals, went on simple calls like rescuing kittens from trees. Miranda was completely enthusiastic, bustling around the center like a whirlwind, giving everyone instructions. As for me, I kept quiet and did as I was told. After all, they don't say for nothing. If you want to live in peace, don't argue with your mother-in-law. Catherine soon lost steam. Her job as a teacher took a lot of energy, and she no longer had enough for full-fledged volunteering. But Miranda and I got into it fully. Somehow, imperceptibly to myself, I started to enjoy it. I liked helping the animals, seeing their trusting eyes, feeling needed, and to my surprise, it was easy and fun being around Miranda. One day, we were sent on an emergency call to a nature reserve. A young deer had gotten caught in a trap and severely injured its leg. When we arrived, the poor thing was barely breathing from pain and fear. "Ethan, quick, hold it!" Miranda commanded, taking bandaging materials from her bag. "I'll try to treat the wound." I knelt down next to the deer and carefully but firmly grabbed it by the neck and body. The animal jerked, snorted, but couldn't break free. Meanwhile, Miranda deftly freed its leg from the trap and applied a bandage. I couldn't help but admire her precise, confident movements. What an extraordinary woman. We managed quickly. Sensing freedom, the deer bolted into the forest as far as its bandaged leg would allow. And we were left sitting on the glade, catching our breath and smiling at each other. "Well, partner, not bad work," Miranda winked at me, pulling off her gloves. Radiant wrinkles gathered at the corners of her eyes. "You might just turn into a decent volunteer in time." "You bet," I snorted with pleasure, stretching. "Where would I go with such a feisty mother-in-law? You'd probably wrestle a bear if you had to." Miranda burst out laughing, her laughter echoing across the glade. And I suddenly caught myself admiring her profile, clearly outlined against the piercing blue sky. I caught myself and pulled back. What was this fantasy, Ethan? Some kind of ladies' man showing up. You shouldn't be thinking about that at all. Shaking my head, I got up and offered Miranda my hand. From the touch of her warm fingers, it was like an electric shock ran through my body. I jerked my hand away as if burned. Miranda raised her eyebrows in surprise, but remained silent. She just gave me a long, studying look. On the way back, we hardly spoke. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, fighting the strange excitement inside. And I diligently pushed away the thought that at any cost, I wanted to touch Miranda again, to feel her skin, breathe in her scent. "Hey, stop! What the hell is this? Pull yourself together, man. Find a time and place for inappropriate fantasies. Get it out of your head, forget about it. Miranda is your mother-in-law, your wife's closest relative. Period. But, as it turned out, easier said than done. From that day on, I could no longer perceive Miranda only as a relative. As a woman, yes, an incredibly attractive woman. But as a mother-in-law, alas, no. This was the beginning of the end. The first pebble that had fallen, triggering a monstrous avalanche. And I was already rolling down its slope, unable to stop. For the next couple of weeks, Miranda and I continued to work at the rescue service, as if nothing had happened. Or we pretended that nothing had happened. I carefully kept my distance, averted my eyes, avoided touching her. But I felt a strange, nagging feeling growing and spreading inside. A painful attraction multiplied by shame and guilt. Miranda seemed to be staying within bounds too. She joked, laughed, gave out instructions. But sometimes I caught her giving me a long, intent look. There was something in it. Evaluating? Questioning? Hell, I didn't understand it myself. I just got chills down my spine, and an aching emptiness appeared in my solar plexus. One day, we received an emergency call. In a nearby forest, a bear cub had become stuck in a narrow crevice. The poor thing had fallen in there, God knows how, and had already spent 2 days without food or water. When we arrived, its pitiful whimpering could be heard from 100 meters away. "Oh my God! Poor baby!" Miranda gasped, leaning over the crevice. "How are we going to get it out of there?" I estimated the width of the crevice and squatted down. Yeah, it was awkward. I'd have to go inside. There was no other way out. The bear cub had wedged itself too deep, out of arm's reach. "I'll go down," I said resolutely, taking off my jacket. "We should have a rope in the car. Bring it." Miranda nodded and rushed off. A couple of minutes later, she returned with a coil of strong rope and a harness. I tightened the knot around my waist and attached the end of the rope with a carabiner. "Okay, you'll belay me," I commanded. "As soon as I say pull, pull with all your might, understood?" "Understood," Miranda nodded, nervously biting her lip. She squeezed my hand and looked into my eyes. "Ethan, please be careful. Don't take any foolish risks, okay?" From her touch and gaze, something broke inside me. I wanted to pull her towards me, embrace her, reassure her, to say that everything would be okay, but I just clenched my teeth and turned away. "Don't lecture me. All right, I'm going." Descending was awkward and cramped. A couple of times I almost fell, catching myself just in time on rocky ledges. Sensing an intruder, the bear cub retreated further and whimpered loudly. "Shh, little one, shh," I muttered softly, carefully reaching out my hands towards it. "Uncle Ethan won't hurt you." "We'll get you out of here. Just hang in there." The whimpering stopped for a moment, replaced by frightened panting. The bear cub looked at me with its shiny black eyes, trembling all over. Poor thing, just a baby. And how on earth did it manage to fall in here? "Come on, come here," I called, holding out my open palms. "Don't be afraid, it's all right." And oh wonder, the bear cub moved, sideways, warily. It crawled towards me nonetheless. Closer, closer. Now I could reach out and grab it. Got it! I grabbed the cub by the scruff of its neck and pulled it towards me. The bear cub squealed desperately, struggled, but I held on tight. I pressed it to my chest, braced my feet against the walls of the crevice. "Miranda, pull!" With a jerk, I was hauled upwards. Sharp rocks scraped my back and shoulders even through the thick fabric of my t-shirt. But that didn't matter. The main thing was not to let go of the frightened bear cub, to hold it tight, to shield it from impacts. When we finally made it to the surface, I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air. My whole body ached and hurt, but the bear cub was unharmed. It struggled in my arms, whimpering in fright. "Shh, little one, it's all over," I murmured, stroking the coarse fur. "We'll take you to the doctor now, get you patched up and—" I didn't get to finish. Miranda flung herself at me, hugging me so tightly that my bones creaked. "Oh, Ethan," she sobbed, pressing her cheek to my chest. "You scared me so much, I thought the worst." From her embrace and closeness, my head spun. My heart pounded somewhere in my throat. My mouth went dry. My arms automatically encircled her slender shoulders, pulling her closer. "Hey, what's wrong with you?" I mumbled in confusion, feeling Miranda trembling. "Everything's fine, you see?" She raised her tear-stained eyes to me. For a moment, something complex, something painful flickered in them. But in the next second, Miranda pulled away, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Sorry, I was so scared for you." and before I could figure out what was happening, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to mine. It lasted only a moment, a barely perceptible touch, but it was like a lightning bolt shot through me. I froze, afraid to breathe, afraid to believe what was happening. Miranda recoiled, looking at me with wide eyes. They swam with horror mixed with feverish excitement. "Oh, God, what am I doing?" escaped her lips. "Ethan, I'm sorry, But I was no longer listening. Unable to resist any longer, I crossed the distance separating us in 2 strides and enfolded Miranda in an embrace. I pressed my lips to hers in a passionate, greedy kiss, pouring into it all the strength of my pent-up feelings. Miranda froze for a moment, then with sudden determination wound her arms around my neck, responding with no less fervor. The whole world ceased to exist. There was only the 2 of us, and this maddening, irresistible attraction. Hands roamed bodies, unconsciously crumpling clothes. I wanted to get even closer, to merge into one, to dissolve completely. At some point, Miranda pushed me away forcefully. She stepped back, pressing her fingers to her swollen lips. Her eyes swam with such turmoil, such agony, that my heart clenched. No, we shouldn't," she breathed. "This is wrong, Ethan. We can't." I swallowed hard, trying to gather my scattered thoughts. My head was buzzing. A painful arousal tugged at my groin. "Yes, damn it, we can't. We shouldn't. This is madness." "You're right," I said hoarsely. "I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me." Miranda nodded convulsively. She turned away, hugging herself. She was still trembling. "Let's just forget about it, okay? Nothing happened. It was a momentary lapse, nothing more." Forget. Easy to say. I would never in a million years forget the taste of her lips, the heat of her body, the way she moaned into my mouth, the way she arched towards me. Shaking my head, I pushed away the unbidden thoughts. No, I had to get a grip. Indeed, a lapse. It happened to anyone on an adrenaline rush. We'll go back to work. And it will pass. That's what I thought then. Naive idiot. As if you could just forget something like that. Simply take it and get it out of your head like a bad dream. Yeah, right. I was in over my head. And this story was only just beginning. The next 2 weeks turned into sheer hell for me. I tossed and turned with insomnia. As soon as I closed my eyes, Miranda's face appeared before my mind's eye, her gaze clouded with passion, her parted lips. I remembered the heat of her skin under my fingers, the defenseless curve of her neck, and it overwhelmed me. In the mornings, I got up feeling completely drained. I shuffled to the shower, staring dumbly at the streams of water, trying to come to my senses, to wash away the phantom traces of our insane intimacy. But it didn't get any easier. Inside, it felt like a tightly coiled spring, tightening with each passing day, threatening to snap at any moment. Catherine seemed to suspect something. She looked at me with concern, tried to get me to talk, asked what had happened, why I wasn't myself. I denied it, mumbling something about stress and insomnia, lying to the face of the woman I loved, and hating myself for that lie. Miranda and I hardly crossed paths, only on rescue service business on joint call-outs. And even then, we kept our distance. We spoke strictly about work, avoiding each other's eyes. It was safer that way, for both of us. But the damn attraction didn't go away. As soon as I found myself near Miranda, I was gripped by a feverish shiver. All my senses became heightened to the extreme. I caught the slightest changes in her intonations, tracked her every gesture, and I dreamed of touching her, of gathering her in my arms, squeezing her until her bones creaked, of devouring her lips, tormenting her, subjugating her. Lord, what was happening to me? I felt like I was in the grip of a fever. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Everything fell from my hands. My colleagues walked on eggshells around me, not daring to say another word. It was clear that I was as taut as a wire. The slightest misstep, and I would snap. One day, I had to be left alone with Miranda. A general cleaning was underway at the shelter, and we were assigned to tidy up the enclosures. The other volunteers dispersed to other rooms, while we were stuck in a cramped antechamber with buckets and rags. I furiously scrubbed the bars of the cage, trying not to look at Miranda. I could feel her fussing behind my back, concentrating with soft huffs. Damn how I wanted to turn around, to approach her, to breathe in the scent of her hair, to touch her, even with just the tips of my fingers, but I just clenched my teeth and wielded the brush even more fiercely. And suddenly Miranda dropped something, a coil of wire it seemed. She gasped, stepped back, and slammed right into me. Taken by surprise, I dropped the bucket. Dirty water splashed onto the floor, spreading in a murky puddle. "Oh, sorry!" Miranda grabbed the rag lying on the floor and rushed to wipe it up. She went down on her knees, crawling at my feet. "I'm so clumsy. I'm always dropping things." I stood rooted to the spot, afraid to move. I stared at her bowed red head, at the endearing vertebrae protruding on her neck. My ears were ringing. My throat felt like it was in a steel vise. Damn, how I longed to sink my fingers into that hair, to grasp it, to force her to tilt her head back, and to devour those parted lips, tormenting them, subjugating them. "Ethan." Miranda looked up at me in surprise. It seemed she had said something, but I hadn't heard her. "Are you all right? You look pale." I nodded jerkily. Averted my eyes, hiding the hunger blazing in them. Just a little longer, and I wouldn't be responsible for my actions. To hell with work, to hell with consequences. I would pin her against the wall right now and... Yes, I'm fine," I forced out. "It's just stuffy in here. I'm going to get some air." And I fled in disgrace. I rushed out the door, greedily gasping for air. My feet carried me to the car of their own accord. I collapsed into the seat, hiding my face in my hands. I growled through clenched teeth, a low, agonized sound. Damn it! I was completely losing it. Any moment now I might pounce on Miranda right there in the shelter. And damn the consequences, damn what anyone thought. No, I had to do something. This couldn't go on. Otherwise I would go completely insane. And I would drag Miranda down with me. I could see she was suffering too, from the look in her eyes. She wanted it just as much. She was tormenting herself in the same way. Good Lord, what had we gotten ourselves into? And how were we going to get out of this mess? That evening, I barely ate anything. I silently poked at my food with my fork, unable to taste it. Catherine was telling me something, sharing school news. But I was only half listening. Miranda's face kept appearing before my eyes. Bewildered, beckoning. I had almost given myself away today. It seemed she understood everything from my gaze, from my stiff movements. Damn it all. After dinner, I went to the study, pleading a headache. I collapsed into an armchair, cradling my head in my hands. I had to stop this madness. Cut myself off from Miranda, minimize contact. Otherwise, it would end in catastrophe. I would lose my family, my job, the respect of those around me. It wasn't worth it. Decided. From tomorrow, no more shared shifts. Only business communication, strictly about work. No personal topics, no emotions, cold politeness and detachment. Maybe that way I could stifle this cursed attraction. Tear it out by the roots from my heart, from my body, even if it drew blood, even if it tore flesh. There was no other way. That's what I decided. Only the heart, it seems, cannot be commanded. It doesn't give a damn about the reasoning of the mind, about fear and guilt. It wants what it wants, and damn me if I know how to fight it. The entire following month, I avoided Miranda as much as I could. I declined joint call-outs, cut conversations short. I remained pointedly aloof, almost hostile. To all her attempts to talk, I responded curtly and gruffly. And it seemed she got my message. She withdrew too, closed herself off. She only looked at me sometimes with silent reproach, as if to say, "How can you, Ethan, after everything that was between us?" But I clenched my teeth and remained silent. Because lying to myself was the last thing I would do. There was nothing between us, except for a couple of kisses and almost accidental embraces. Big deal, the binomial theorem. It happens to everyone in the spring with those raging hormones. It's no reason to send your family and decency to hell. Catherine, it seemed, breathed a sigh of relief. When I stopped disappearing at the shelter for days on end and started paying more attention to her, she thought we were getting back on track. Life was returning to its usual course, but I remained silent and quietly withered inside, from an insatiable, gut-wrenching longing. At night, it would hit me with renewed force. As soon as I closed my eyes, I saw Miranda, as I remembered her in that crazy moment in the forest, with eyes darkened by passion, with lips swollen from kisses. I groaned through clenched teeth, burying my face in the pillow. And I burned with shame and unfulfilled desire. And then what I had feared so much happened. One day the shelter organized something like a picnic for the volunteers, a kind of team building in nature, with shish kebabs sitting around the campfire and heart-to-heart conversations. I made excuses until the last moment, but Catherine persuaded me. She said we both needed to unwind, socialize with friends. Well, I fell for it like the last sucker. Anything was better than sitting at home climbing the walls from idleness. Maybe in company it would get easier. I wouldn't have to think about Miranda every minute and torment myself with guilt. Yeah, right. As soon as we arrived at the glade, I realized I was in trouble. Miranda was already there. She was fussing around the barbecue, helping to stoke the coals. Seeing Catherine and me, she raised her eyebrows and looked away. She didn't even say hello. I nodded grimly at the other volunteers and headed for the canopy with the tables. I sat off to one side, pretending to be engrossed in slicing bread. But I secretly watched Miranda. Damn, she looked so good. In simple jeans and a t-shirt with her hair in a casual ponytail. Flushed from the heat, with coal-smeared hands. So vibrant, so real. It took my breath away. All evening, I sat on tenterhooks. I responded listlessly to questions, forced myself to joke. But I kept stealing furtive, hungry glances at Miranda. She pretended not to notice. She laughed, chatted with the volunteers. Only her shoulders tensed slightly, as if she too felt ill at ease in my presence. By 10 o'clock, people started leaving. Some went home, some were spending the night in tents. Catherine and I also started getting ready to go. I went to the car for my backpack, and when I returned, Catherine was nowhere to be seen. I got flustered and started looking around. And then Miranda emerged from behind the trees. "If you're looking for Catherine," she said, not meeting my eyes, "she went to help Debbie. She had a little too much to drink, needs to be taken to her tent." I frowned. What a nuisance. Now there was no telling how long we'd have to wait. And I really didn't want to be left alone with Miranda. "Okay, I'll just wait in the car then," I muttered, turning away. "Ethan, wait!" From her soft, pleading voice, chills ran down my spine. I froze, swallowing hard. No, I couldn't. I had to leave before I did something stupid. But Miranda had already stepped closer. She stood in front of me, almost touching me with her chest. She looked into my face, serious, probing. "We need to talk. We can't keep avoiding each other forever." "There's nothing to talk about," I said through clenched teeth. "You understand. What happened between us? It was a mistake. A momentary lapse. It's better to just forget and move on." Miranda shook her head. Such bitterness swam in her eyes that it was almost physically painful for me. "A mistake, you say? A lapse? So you didn't feel anything then? It was all a figment? A game of a sick imagination?" Her voice trembled and faltered. I could see how much effort it took her to maintain her composure, and something inside me twisted and writhed. I wanted to shout that it was all nonsense, that I had felt it, oh how I had felt it, with every cell of my body, with every nerve, and I continued to feel it. Even now when she was so close, breath to breath, eyes to eyes. But I clenched my fists and turned away, with difficulty, almost painfully. "Exactly. There was nothing, Miranda, and there won't be. I'm sorry, but we can't. I can't." An oppressive, stifling silence hung. I clenched my fingers until my nails dug into my palms. I prayed that this conversation would end soon, otherwise I would snap and do something irreparable. "I see. I understand." Miranda's voice sounded colorless, lifeless, as if something vital, something alive had been taken out of her. The spark that I had always loved in her. It had gone out, dissolved into the evening dusk. "I see," she repeated, her lips twisting bitterly. "You've decided everything. Very well. Have it your way, Ethan." And abruptly turning, she almost ran away. Only a fleeting glimpse of her pale silhouette in the darkness, and she was gone behind the trees. And I was left standing there, clutching my ill-fated backpack, feeling something inside me writhing and screaming in pain. On the way home, Catherine and I rode in silence. My wife dozed in the passenger seat, and I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white from the tightness of my grip. The thought pounded in my head like a toxin. "It's over. You've blown it, Ethan. You've pushed away the only woman who what? Captured your soul? Awakened something primal, primitive inside you? No, nothing like that. Just a fling, flirting on the edge of a foul, with your own damn mother-in-law. Ugh, what a disgrace." I clenched my teeth, forcing down the agonizing lump rising in my throat. No more. Enough wallowing in self-pity. What's done is done. I had to move on, get on with life. After all, I had a wife, a beloved, faithful one, and as soon as we had children, all foolishness would fly right out of my head. I would be a model family man, you'll see. But it's easy to say, hard to do. For the heart cannot be commanded. You can't tell it, don't you dare ache and pine. Forget, erase it from your memory. Like hell, it had taken root there, grown like a splinter. And now it was only festering, giving no respite, day and night. After that conversation, Miranda seemed to vanish into thin air. She stopped going to the shelter, quit volunteering. Catherine shrugged her shoulders in bewilderment. What's up with Mom? She used to throw herself into it with such fervor, and now she's suddenly cooled off. Maybe I know the reason. I kept my mouth shut, averted my eyes, as if I would open up about it. I already felt sick enough, as if my soul had been turned inside out. And what could I say? That I had blown it myself, destroyed the fragile feeling that had barely taken root? Yeah, my wife would have been delighted. Go on, chase after her. Catch your happiness while you still can. No way. I had made my choice. A month passed, then another. Life seemed to have returned to its usual course. Work, home, occasional trips to nature with Catherine. I also dropped volunteering, citing busyness. I didn't have the strength to reopen old wounds, to stir up memories. But for some reason, it didn't get any easier. On the contrary, a dull, nagging pain settled in my chest, as if I hadn't simply given up a fling, but cut off something important, something essential, as if I had become disabled, incomplete. At night, I often woke up from my own screams. I dreamed of Miranda, sad, haggard, with a vacant gaze and a bitter line around her mouth. She looked at me and said nothing, and that silence made me want to howl. Meanwhile, Catherine made a decision. One evening, when we were sitting in the kitchen after dinner, she suddenly put her hand on my shoulder and looked me in the eye. Ethan, we need to have a serious talk. I can see you haven't been yourself lately. My insides clenched. Had she guessed? Sensed that something was amiss? Damn it, what do I do now? But my wife's next words made me go cold with horror. I spoke to Mom the other day about why she's no longer going to the shelter. I froze, afraid to move. Only my heart was pounding somewhere in my throat, throbbing in my ears. And, I forced out, barely moving my leaden tongue. Catherine sighed, lowering her gaze. Mom said there was some kind of conflict between you two, something to do with the organization of work at the shelter. You argued, and your relationship has been strained ever since. She says you don't even want to see her. For a moment, I closed my eyes. I see. So Miranda hadn't confided the details of our conflict to her daughter. She had concocted a plausible story to avoid traumatizing and upsetting Catherine. It was so noble, so generous of her, that my heart clenched. After everything that had happened between us, she was still protecting our family. My reputation in my wife's eyes. Good Lord, why did everything have to be so complicated? Why couldn't I just say to hell with all conventions, to say it like it is? I love your mother. I want to be with her. And our marriage, well, I'm sorry, it didn't work out. Apparently it wasn't meant to be. But I knew I couldn't do that. Too much was at stake. My measured, familiar life, my career, my reputation. And there was no future for Miranda and me. Such relationships don't happen between a mother-in-law and son-in-law. It goes against all laws and decency. Ethan, Catherine's voice pulled me out of my gloomy thoughts. Are you all right? Maybe you and Mom should talk, resolve your differences. You used to get along so well. I forced myself to smile. Forced, unnatural, just the corners of my mouth turning up. Everything's fine, dear. It's just, there really was a bit of a falling out. Nothing serious. It'll smooth itself out in time. Catherine shook her head doubtfully, but didn't insist. She just gave me a long, probing look, as if she were trying to see something behind my familiar mask of the dutiful husband. And I sat there thinking, here it is, my punishment. To live with constant guilt, a weight on my heart. To know that I had betrayed the closest person, and not even have the opportunity to atone. Because the truth would destroy everything, my life, and the lives of my loved ones. Is it within the power of one person to bear such a burden? To live with a black hole in your chest that sucks you in, devours you from the inside? To pretend that everything is fine? To scream into a pillow at night, choking on silent sobs? Though I had chosen this burden myself, I had renounced my happiness, the one I loved, and now I had to live with it somehow. to bear my cross in silence, teeth clenched, because I'm a man, because I bear responsibility for my family. But sometimes, in moments of weakness, I thought faint-heartedly, to hell with it. Maybe just say screw it all, and rush to Miranda, fall to my knees, beg for forgiveness, say that I love her, that I can't imagine life without her, and then, come what may. But time and again I pushed those thoughts away. No, Ethan, enough. You've already made your decision. You made your choice, in favor of duty and decency. Now you must live with it, even if it meant killing and resurrecting yourself anew every single day. You got yourself into this trap. You built this wall yourself, between you and your happiness. 6 months later, Catherine announced that she was pregnant. I should have been jumping for joy, should have been carrying her in my arms. Well, the firstborn, the heir, every man's dream. But for some reason, I didn't feel anything. Only a dull, nagging pain under my ribs, as if someone kept stabbing me with a knife in the same spot, over and over again, raw and exposed. Catherine glowed with happiness. She sorted through baby clothes, flipped through catalogs of strollers and cribs, and I looked at her and thought, why? Why couldn't I rejoice with her? I should, damn it. I should want this child, make plans for the future. But inside, there was only emptiness, profound, hopeless. Miranda came a week after the announcement. Catherine had invited her to share the joy, to discuss the future grandchild. I was sitting in the study when I heard her voice in the hallway. My heart plummeted somewhere. My mouth went dry. If only I didn't give myself away. If only I could keep my composure. I listened intently to their conversation with Catherine. Miranda was asking something softly. Catherine was answering, joyfully, excitedly. Then cabinet doors banged, bags rustled. Apparently my wife was showing off her recent purchases. I sat there, neither alive nor dead, feverishly wondering, should I go say hello or hole up in here? My heart yearned for Miranda, wanted to see her, hear her, if only for a moment. But my cowardly mind whispered, why? You'll only reopen your wounds, stir up barely healed scars. Suddenly there was a knock on the study door. I almost jumped out of my chair in surprise. Could it be? Ethan, may I come in? Miranda's voice, quiet, colorless, so foreign and unfamiliar that something painfully clenched inside me. Yes, of course, I said, clearing my throat. Come in. The door opened a crack, and there she was on the threshold, aged, haggard, with a vacant gaze and tightly pressed lips. My heart skipped a beat. Good Lord, what have we done? How did we manage to mess everything up, to destroy the little that bound us together? Catherine asked me to call you, Miranda said dryly, not looking at me. She wants to show you some new things for the baby. The baby? Right. We were going to have a baby now. I let out a hysterical inward chuckle. Well-timed, I must say, just in time to bury the last hopes and dreams. I'll be right there, I muttered, pretending to be engrossed in the papers on my desk. I still didn't look at Miranda. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to control myself, that I would break down crying, come completely undone like a snotty brat. She stood in the doorway for a minute, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't bring herself to. Then she turned quietly and left, closing the door behind her. And in that gesture there was so much pain, so much hopeless resignation, that I felt like howling. What are we doing? Ruining our own lives, squashing everything bright and real inside us. But for what? To maintain the facade of a happy family? For the elusive, that's how it should be? I groaned through clenched teeth. I rested my forehead on my folded hands on the desk. Miranda's haggard face stood before my eyes, her vacant, deathly tired gaze, and I realized, that's it. I can't do this anymore. I can't and don't want to play this game. To pretend to be the dutiful husband and son-in-law, to lie to myself and others, renouncing my feelings. Renouncing the woman who had become everything to me, my heir, my purpose, my guiding star. To hell with it, to hell with the opinions of others, with morality, with decency. I will no longer allow fear and duty to decide for me, to dictate my life, my happiness. Rising abruptly, I flung open the study door. I strode decisively into the living room, where Catherine and Miranda were chattering about something. They both fell silent in surprise, staring at me. Astonishment was written on my wife's face, and in Miranda's gaze flickered hope. Catherine, I began hoarsely, stopping in the middle of the room. We need to have a serious talk. I'm sorry, but this can't go on. I have to tell you the truth. The truth, my wife repeated uncomprehendingly. What are you talking about, Ethan? What truth? I turned my gaze to Miranda. I met her eyes and saw unspoken support in them, approval, as if she were saying, "Go on, take the plunge. I'm with you no matter what happens." And I took the plunge. I drew a deep breath and spoke the words that had been burning my tongue for so long, the words I should have said many months ago. I love Miranda, Catherine. I've loved her for a very long time, and she loves me too. We tried to fight this feeling. We tried to smother it, but I can't lie and pretend anymore. All the color drained from Catherine's face. She stood with her mouth open, staring at me with huge, horror-filled eyes. What? Ethan, have you gone mad? You and my mother? God, tell me this is a joke. I shook my head. My heart was pounding so hard it seemed it would burst from my chest. But I had to finish, to say it all. It's not a joke, Catherine. And I'm so sorry you have to hear this. Believe me, I never wanted to hurt you. But I can't go on lying anymore. But what about me? What about the baby? Catherine unconsciously pressed her palms to her still flat belly. You're leaving us, for my mother. Tears streamed down her face. I could barely hold back my own sobs. It was painful. To destroy what I had spent so many years building. To shatter the heart of the woman I had once loved. But there was no other way. Otherwise, my own heart would have shattered. It would have bled out, become an arid desert. We're not abandoning you, Miranda said softly, stepping closer. She looked at her daughter with pain and guilt, but also with unwavering determination. We'll always be there for you. We'll help, we'll support you. The child will want for nothing. It's just, Miranda and I have to be together. We can't be apart. And with those words, she took my hand confidently. She stood beside me, shoulder to shoulder, as if to say, here I am, your other half, your destiny. And damn the whole world, damn the sidelong glances and gossip. We'll be together in defiance of everything. Catherine froze, her gaze shifting from me to her mother. Her eyes swam with pain, disbelief, anger, but gradually something else replaced them. Bitter understanding, resignation to the inevitable. I see. So that's how it is, she said barely audibly, lowering her head. I see. I guess I have no choice. Turning, she walked quickly out of the room. A minute later, the front door slammed. Miranda and I were left alone. For several long moments, we were silent. We just stood there holding hands, processing what had happened, getting used to the new reality. Then I pulled Miranda towards me. I crushed her in an embrace until our bones creaked, burying my face in her hair. Lord, what bliss it was to finally embrace her, without hiding, without concealing, openly and freely. What will happen now? She asked hoarsely, pressing her face into my shoulder. How will we cope with all this? I kissed the top of her head. My temples were pounding so hard my head was spinning. But my heart felt amazingly light, as if a mountain had been lifted from my shoulders. I don't know, I admitted, but we'll manage. Together, we'll get through anything, because this is right. This is how it's meant to be. And I wasn't lying. I really believed that we would make it. This was not a passing infatuation, not a whim. This was destiny, love, setting everything in its rightful place. Of course, we had much to overcome. The inevitable divorce, the division of property, the sideways glances and gossip of friends and acquaintances, the difficult explanation to our families. But I was ready to go through it all, to endure any trials, just to be near Miranda, to see her smile in the mornings, to hear her ringing laughter, to love her freely, wholeheartedly, without looking back. For that is the only way to live, to the fullest, without regard for others' opinions, listening only to the voice of your heart. We may lose much, friends, our familiar way of life, the status of a model family, but we will gain so much more, each other, real, alive, loving in defiance of everything, and let the whole world wait. After all, it's none of its business who we choose to be happy with. The main thing is to have no shame in our souls, so that one day, looking back, we can firmly say, we lived life to the fullest. We weren't afraid to take risks, to put everything on the line, for the most important thing, love, and I believe it was worth it. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.